will begin shortly. Let us wait for other students to join the event. Please stand by. Thank you. Students, please stand for the opening prayer to be led by Kate On. Let us put ourselves in the holy presence of the Lord. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, thank you for giving us this opportunity to have a positive discussion about mental health. Given these trying times, we are so grateful to have you guiding us throughout our lives' ups and downs. Please allow us to fully maximize the time we have today to learn as much as we can about this topic. Please help us to apply in our daily lives whatever we learn from today's talk. We also pray that you may bless our speaker with your wisdom to share her knowledge with us. Lastly, please continue guiding us as we strive to create a loving and supportive eco community, especially during this ODL setup. In Jesus' name, amen. Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception, pray for us. To Jesus through Mary, we give thanks. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen.
Let us all place our right hand on our left chest as we sing the Philippine National Anthem.
Bayang magiliw, pero nagsilanganan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiliw, sa manlulupig, kita masisingin, sa lahat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mo kamay, ay ilang ang tulahan, awit sa paglayang nilahan, ang isang ng watawat mo'y nagumpay na nagiging, ang bituin ng araw niya kayang makapagpagiging, lupa ng araw ng maraming pagkita, kulay namin sa likod. Aming ligaya naman may mamagin, alamat ay nagdahil sa'yo.
Please stand straight and keep your arms by your sides as we sing the Ika School song.
Beloved school, your song we sing, your banner we raise high. Immaculate conception will bring your spirit till we die. So lead us, make our life a mirror of your bounteous grace. We'll grow strong in times of strife by following your ways. Our life is
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this virtual mental health talk entitled Journeying Together for a Healthy Well-Being. I am Thea Concha from grade 11.
I'm Alexa Ampio from grade 11 Mercy, and it is our pleasure to be your host for today. Before we get started with our talk, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type in your question in the chat box. Just a gentle reminder for everyone, please be clear and polite in asking questions. Feel free to do this anytime throughout the talk. We will bring up some of your questions later since we have time for a Q&A at the end. Let us now begin. We've anticipated long enough for this talk to come, especially now that there have been so many challenges since the start of the pandemic. Now that we are in ODL, struggles are here and there. Amidst our challenges, it is timely to have this mental health talk that will help us keep ourselves emotionally, physically, and mentally healthy. Let's have Thea introduce you to our speaker.
Our guest speaker graduated from Ateneo de Manila University with a degree in Communication Technology and minors in both International Business and Marketing. She currently works for Arlington Memorial Chapels as a sales and marketing executive and continues to pursue her true passion for service as an advocate for mental health. Ms. Bettina is the founder and managing director of Spring Philippines, a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2018. They aim to end the stigma of mental illnesses and create a safe space for those who continue to navigate their way through their mental health journey. She has since been invited by universities like Ateneo de Manila University, De La Salle University, University of Eastern Magsaysay, and high schools like Assumption and Ateneo to conduct talks on behalf of the organization. Most recently, Ms. Bettina has been acknowledged as one of Lifetime Asia's Women of the Day and as Lifestyle Asia's Game Changer in 2019. Let us give a warm eco welcome to Ms. Bettina Margarita Jose.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, Thea, and thank you, Alexa, for that great introduction. So, I know it's a little bit weird to be talking to you guys through a screen, but, we make do with what we have. So like what they said, my name is Bettina Jose. I am the founder and managing director of Spring Philippines. And honestly, I am so grateful to have been given another opportunity to share this space with the wonderful students of ICA. So last year, I actually also gave a talk to some of you girls. So I'm not sure who amongst you are watching and have heard me speak or who have met me, but definitely it is such a great feeling to be back here today, especially at a time like this. So, we're going to be spending the next 35 to 45 minutes just having a conversation, talking to each other about what we're going through, and hopefully you guys pick up a little bit of my knowledge and it helps you through this very difficult time. So again, I am representing Spring Philippines, a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2018. So when we were founded in 2018, I didn't really have any idea of what I wanted to do. It was just like on a whim. I wanted to do something to pay it forward and for an advocacy that mattered a lot to me. So next slide, please. So when I decided that I was going to found an organization, it was like a really just big idea, and I really know what I wanted to do with it. Sorry, can we do the next slide, please? So anyway, when I started, I reached out to two of my friends, and I just said like, hey, I want to do something. There's something that I've really been thinking of doing. I'm in a good place, and I think I'm very capable of helping at this point. So I called on them and I said, mental health is something that's very important to me. It's very relevant to me. It's personal. And I feel like I'm in a place where I can finally pay it forward. But when we sat in a Starbucks years ago, I had no clue about what I wanted to do, about how we wanted to go about things. It was just a germ of an idea. And it was just something that we felt very passionately about. But I guess for you guys to understand why I started this whole foundation, it's important to know what triggered that. So it's hard because I'm not really seeing anybody's reactions right now, but I'm sure all of you can relate when I say that, the first thing you do in the morning is like you check your phones, right? Especially now that you're doing online classes, you're checking your emails right away, you're checking your groups. You're checking all of these important messages that you have. In my case, when I was going through that day in 2017, I just instinctively opened Facebook, so I'm sure we can all relate. So we opened Facebook and I started scrolling, and you know how like on Facebook, you on Facebook, you know how like you don't really know what you're doing with it. You're kind of just scrolling constantly. So that's exactly what I was doing. I was just going from one thing to the next. Sorry, I think we're gonna take a little pause for a bit to make sure that our connection is up and running. So I'm gonna pause for a bit. No worries, it's the way of the world. The digital woes, it's part of it. So let's just wait for everything to kind of stabilize, and then we'll get back on it. All right, so there was a little bit of that lag earlier. I hope everyone can hear me clearly. I'm just gonna wait for the go signal from everyone. So if everyone can just, I don't know, give me a thumbs up. Are we good to go? Can you imagine how funny this would have been in real life if I just like paused? All right, so I'm getting a thumbs up from those in the Zoom call right now. So I'm just gonna move on forward. All right, so like I said, I'm not sure who of you can relate. I hope everyone can, so I don't feel so bad about myself. But there was this day where, I guess I didn't really have anything to do. So I kind of just opened up my phone and, I started scrolling on Facebook. And you know how Facebook works. You just kind of scroll endlessly and you don't realize, oh gosh, it's been like 2 hours, mindlessly not doing anything. And that's exactly what happened to me. But I guess in that day, I didn't have anything better to do talaga. And nobody was inviting me out or something like that. So I went on Instagram. And Instagram is the same, it's the same nightmare. And when you go on Instagram and you start watching those stories, it's just an endless loop of watching one story after the next. And that's exactly what happened to me. So I was watching one story after the other, and the next thing I know, it had been what, like 2 hours again. But I guess wala talaga akong social life. So I went on the next thing that I could find on my phone, which is what I like to call my frenemy of a social media app. So this is Twitter. So, when I started out with Twitter years ago, I'm a little bit older than you girls. So when I started with Twitter, it wasn't really the same platform that we know today. This platform was just the land of the memas, So for those of you who don't know what that means, it's just basta may masabi ka. So, on Twitter, what I would do is like, I would say, oh, I'm craving for a waffle, or like, I just, went swimming, really random, useless bits of information. But as we all know, Twitter is no longer the same today. Twitter has become a little bit toxic. Twitter is a little bit different from what I grew up with. So I don't normally go on this platform anymore. But I guess, like I said, on this day, I had nothing better to do. So I went on the app. And when I opened Twitter, for some reason, for some serendipitous reason, there was a video clip. And on this video clip, it was a noontime host from the network that whose franchise was renewed. Anyway, this noontime host actually was interviewing an elderly woman who, was sharing about her plights in life and was, just sharing about her struggles in life. And she actually said to this noontime host, alam mo po na de-depress po ako. Now, this noontime host actually had the audacity to say, alam mo yung depression na yan, gawa lang yan. Para sa mayaman lang yan. After watching that clip, that portion of the clip, I closed the video and I spiraled into a really, really bad panic attack and I couldn't breathe and I just was uncontrollably crying and I didn't really understand what it was. The problem was with me. I didn't know what was going on. But when that had settled and I was able to get my breathing better, I had to ask myself why I was so affected by this, and why I seemed to be so triggered by this. And when the dust had settled and I had been able to regularize my breathing again, I realized that the reason I was so affected by this was because those words that I heard from that noontime host, gawa-gawa lang yan, that and all its other variations, like, get over yourself, don't be so sensitive, suck it up, people have it worse than you, or it's nothing but a figment of your imagination. All of these things and these phrases, these words, these were the same words that I feared I would hear if I admitted that something was wrong or that something felt off. And these same words, gawa-gawa lang yan, were the same words that made me suffer in silence for as long as I did. I knew for a very long time that something was different about me, something was off, something was different. But I was too afraid to admit that and open up or ask for help because I was afraid I would be told exactly this. Gawa-gawa lang yan. Get over yourself. Stop being overly dramatic. You're just being a teenager. And I'm sure some of you can relate. I'm sure some of you have heard this at some point in your lives. And if you did, I'm sorry that you've heard that. But that's the whole point. I'm here to try and change that. Next slide, please. Mental health is something that has always been taboo in our country. Mental health is something that is not regularly discussed. And I'm glad that more people are picking up on this and more people are willing to have this conversation. But today, if I'm going to be talking about mental health, I think it would be quite impossible to do so without allowing you to get to know a little bit more about myself. Now, I have a very different approach talking about mental health. We could go the scientific route, we could go the self-help route, but I like to take a more personal approach, especially with young girls like you. Because here's the thing, not so long ago, I was you. Not so long ago, I sat in a classroom trying to figure out what course I wanted to take, what college I was going to go through, trying to figure out who my real friends were, trying to figure out how to deal with my own personal insecurities. So not long ago, I was you, and I was sitting in the exact same spot you guys are sitting now. Well, probably not at the exact same spot since we're all at our homes right now. And this is a crazy time to be alive, but definitely I can tell you that I can still relate, and I still remember vividly what it was like to be your age, to have your anxieties, to have the troubles that you're facing today. So today I'd like to let you guys in on who I am and who I was growing up. So meet Bettina. Now I like to use this photo not because I think I'm so cute here, although let's face it, look at this little cheerleader that I am. I like to use this photo because I think it's a perfect representation of who I was growing up. I was a very cheerful, bubbly, energetic, independent little girl. So growing up, my parents and my family didn't really have a problem with me or leaving me on my own because I was just so energetic and independent, and I was the kind of kid that you didn't really have to worry about. And knowing you girls, I'm sure you can relate. A lot of you are probably the same. You know, you learned how to take care of yourselves very early. Um, and that's who I was. You know, growing up, people thought I was extroverted. People thought that, you know, I had a lot of friends and things like that. And partially that was true. But for those of you who are aware of the MBTI test, I'm actually 86% introverted. I know that's shocking for someone who's like a public speaker, but I am actually very introverted. That's just trivia for you guys. But anyway, growing up, I excelled at school. You know, I didn't really have a problem with friends. I had a great set of friends, still the same people that I'm friends with today. I did pretty well in terms of socializing, in terms of school. You know, I enrolled myself very early. Like, I was just the kid that you didn't really have to worry about. But growing up, one thing that I always noticed about myself was that I was extremely intense. I mean, if I got like a 7/10 in a quiz, I would completely freak out and be like, this is not acceptable to me, you know, and I'm sure you girls can relate to that as well. Um, I knew that I was very intense for someone my age, but I think I just chalked it up to me being very competitive and, you know, being very, I don't know, type A, I guess. So next slide. This personality carried on till I was grade school and high school, and people definitely thought of me as someone who was very type A, very organized, very responsible. You know, I was always involved in extracurricular activities. So you can just imagine I was the perfect example of someone who would like to overachieve. I like to keep busy. I like to, you know, do great and excel at things. And I always thought that I was just putting too much pressure on myself. And I guess that's part of the reason why I didn't ask for help for so long, is because I always just thought it's normal, you know, I'm just competitive. I just like to excel. I just like to do great at things. But yeah, I grew up to be very type A. A lot of my peers and my teachers like to label me as a born leader. Now, I didn't really understand what that meant. I didn't really understand what it meant to be a born leader or things of that sort, because in my mind, it's like, what does that even mean? Like, you're just being born and they already know you're a leader. Like, I never understood that. But I always appreciated it. I always was flattered by the trust and the responsibility that was being given to me by my peers, by my teachers, and it was flattering. You know, it was great to be given so much trust, and I kind of just lived on that role for as long as I knew how to. They like to tease me back in high school. They like to say I was a roving national bookstore. Um, because I had all these supplies. So you can just imagine the kind of person I was. I had every color of highlighter, pen, pencil, marker, you name it, post-it. You know, I was that type of girl. And I'm sure some of you guys can relate to that role. I was just always the girl with a goal. You know, I was a girl with a plan. I knew what I wanted and I knew how to get it. And that was just never a problem for me, you know, and like I had a very strong personality. I was headstrong. I was, in my mind, I had everything together. And then I'm hit with something that I have no control over. So it was a few years into college when I started to experience very bad panic attacks. And back then, I didn't know what they were called. I mean, in my mind, I was just freaking out. Back then, wow, I sound so old. Back in my time, you know, like in college a few years ago, almost a decade ago, um, it was just college stress, I guess. People didn't really talk about mental health the way we're talking about that now. So it was about 2 years into college where I first met my anxiety. So next slide, please. So, like I said, I didn't really know what it was that I had or what it was that was taking over me, but I knew that it wasn't normal. I knew that it wasn't the way life used to be for me. So when I got into Ateneo, I was so excited. This was exactly what I dreamed about. Kita naman din sa cheerleading uniform ko siguro kung ano ang goal ko since I was a child. I always wanted to go to Ateneo. I knew what course I wanted. I knew I wanted to be in the corporate world and climb the multinational ladder. Like I said, I was the girl with a goal and I knew exactly what I wanted to do and how to get there. What I was not banking on was being diagnosed with a mental illness. So 2 years into college, I would be in a classroom. I would just be in my regular setting in Ateneo, and suddenly I would have a hard time breathing, and I would just be unable to do anything. I would be unable to get a hold of my breathing. I would panic. And that's when I started to realize something's off, something's not right. So, what does my anxiety feel like? Anxiety for me felt like ants crawling on my skin all the way up to my head. Anxiety for me felt like walking through a hallway and thinking that everybody's eyes were on me, everybody's thinking something about me. Anxiety for me felt like nothing I did would ever be good enough. Anxiety for me felt like panicking if my best friend replied to me without emojis. Anxiety to me felt like nothing I did would ever suffice. Anxiety for me felt like this dark place that I was living in my head was going to be my place in this world forever. And in my mind, that was it. That was going to be my life. So it wasn't until 2015 where I was diagnosed with post traumatic stress disorder, generalized anxiety disorder, and a depressive disorder. Wow, it feels like a cocktail of all three things, right? So when I was first told this by the psychiatrist who I was reluctant to see in the first place, I was in denial. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean I have all of these letters, GAD, DAD, PTSD, all of these things? And it was awful. It was so awful to be told that I had all of these things that I suddenly had no control over. This was the girl who knew everything she wanted to do. This was the girl with a goal. This was the girl with a plan. And suddenly I'm being told that, well, this is something that's biological, it's genetic, it happens. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's environment, sometimes it's genetic. And in my case, it was all of those things. So I was in complete denial. In my mind, I was thinking, I'm not sick. I'm just stressed. So maybe I should cut down on stress. But deep down in my gut, I knew. I knew what they were saying had truth to it. I knew what they were saying was right. Because as early as maybe age 7, I knew something was different and I knew something was off. I recall being a 7-year-old, not getting a perfect score in a quiz and thinking to myself, I'm going to run away. But in my mind, I was thinking, what am I even going to run away with? I don't even have things. Anong iimpake ko yun yung uniform ko? I mean, there was nothing for me to pack. So in my mind, I was thinking, I'm just a dramatic 7-year-old. I'm just OA, and like I said, when you live in a culture that constantly kind of embeds that in your mind and kind of tells you you're probably just overthinking, you start to believe that. So when I got to college and even when I knew in my heart something was wrong, I chalked it up to me thinking, probably just overthinking it. It's probably not a big deal until I was told of what I had. And to me, it's crazy because Filipinos are some of the most hospitable people in the world, right? I mean, just this pandemic alone has shown you the beauty of the Filipino spirit. When frontliners needed help, Filipinos were quick to put out their support and help frontliners. When there is a calamity like Ondoy, people are quick to gather and and help. When you're sick, people are quick to help and tell you, hey, you can get better. If you have a cold or a flu, or in some more serious cases, cancer, isn't it people's instinct to tell you, hey, you can get better? You'll get better. There is a way through this. You can medicate, there's therapy, etc. But somehow, when it comes to mental health or mental illness, because it's invisible and because we have chalked it up to be a figment of one's imagination, we ignore it. We don't want to have this conversation because in our minds, it's not that serious. And that's the culture that we've been living in. Next slide, please. And in the Philippines, we live in a society that has, I think, somehow allowed for us to think that suffering is okay. You know, we're a very Catholic country, and I understand that. I grew up in an all-girls Catholic school as well. I went to Assumption, so I understand it. I get it, the devotion and everything. And I think that a part of our religion and our being Catholic has allowed us to want to be more like Jesus Christ, who sacrificed and, you know, allowed ourselves to kind of want to be like Jesus Christ and follow Jesus Christ's impact and example. We wanted to be like him. We wanted to allow ourselves to put other people first. And I think that's a big part of the culture. Anyway, so I think that what's happened is that a lot of the times we allow ourselves to suffer in silence because we're afraid of what people will say, and we've kind of been convinced that, you know, suffering in silence is okay. And as if that suffering inside isn't enough, we now have to contend with the power of social media, where everyone seems to be living their best lives. Now, I'm sure all of you guys are familiar with social media and this whole concept of living your best lives. But here's the thing, I don't even know how this started. I don't know how living our best lives became a thing. I don't know how people began thinking that this is a phenomenon that we needed to follow. But living my best life, what does that mean to us, right? Living my best life, in my case, looked like a friend with hard rock abs, a friend who was excelling at school and had a great set of friends and a great love life. My best life looked like a classmate who was pulling all-nighters. Living my best life, in short, always felt like the comparisons I had to make to other people. So as if the internal pressures and the internal suffering isn't enough, we now have to contend with the pressures of living up to people's expectations or living our best lives, constantly having to curate our lives to look like we're not struggling, you know, or that we're not having a hard time. But here's the truth, we're all struggling. We're all on the same boat. We all should understand that privately or in our own bubbles, we're all having a hard time. But see, on social media or on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook, everyone just has great lighting, great workout clothes, great grades, you know, and it's just, you're constantly thinking, I'm constantly being left behind because everybody else is living their best life. So like I said, as if the internal pressure isn't enough for us to live with, we now have to contend with the pressures of the world. But here's the thing, what I'm doing here with Spring is to allow people to start normalizing this conversation, to start normalizing the hard conversations to have, normalizing saying that, hey, I'm not okay and something's off, I need help. And I think that today, if there's anything I want you guys to learn, it's to start learning how to ask for help. Because these are unprecedented times. I don't think you girls ever expected to have to do school and live up to your own pressures online and away from each other. Part of what was so great about school was that there was a collective pressure that we could all feel together and we were all on the same boat. but now we're apart, and things have just gotten all the more difficult. We're all separate, nobody is around each other, and the pressures haven't really changed, have they? We're also trying to keep up, pretend we're not struggling, pretend we're living our best lives. But here's the truth: we're all having a hard time. This is a very difficult time to be around. And if nobody has told you that it's acceptable to feel that way, then you should hear it from me. Do not force yourselves to be okay at this point, because these are unprecedented times. And I understand that you're all probably trying to focus on your academics, graduating at a time like this, and I don't know, all the other pressures of bio, chem lab, your Mandarin classes, all of these things. I understand that I've been there. But if you haven't been told yet to prioritize your mental health, then I'm telling you now that it's important more than ever to have that conversation. Next slide, please. In a world that we live in the world that we live in today, I think we've somehow forgotten that taking care of ourselves must take precedence. Like I said, I'm sure we all have different priorities right now. You have school, this work, even for the teachers who are listening in today. They're trying not to show you that they're struggling, adjusting to this whole thing, but here's the truth. Everybody is struggling, everybody is trying their best, and we should all cut ourselves a little bit of slack. So this goes out to the girls listening in today and to the teachers as well. Self-care is not selfish. I know, like I said, we have been conditioned by our society, by our religion, and by, I think, like our good-hearted nature as Filipinos to always put somebody else first. You know how, like in a Filipino gathering, it's if you have a guest, you always feed them first. You're always like, kumain ka na ba? Have you eaten? Here, no, you have the first slice. We're always putting other people first. And I think that's beautiful. I think that's a beautiful trait of Filipinos. But because it's been so deeply ingrained in our society and in our minds, we have somehow started to believe that putting ourselves first is unacceptable or that it's selfish. But here's the thing. Have you ever been on a plane? Well, we haven't been on a plane in a very long time because of this pandemic, but I'm sure for those of you who have traveled, I'm sure you've heard the flight attendants tell you, please do not put on the oxygen mask of the person beside you until you've put yours first. Has anyone heard that? I'm sure you guys have. I'm going to pretend and imagine you girls are nodding as I say this. But often we're told, do not put your oxygen mask, put the oxygen mask on somebody else until you put on yours first. What's the reason for this? I've always wondered about this. And I have been told that the reason for this pala was because you might run out of oxygen before you're able to help somebody else first. And when I was told that, I was thinking, wow, what a beautiful analogy of taking care of yourself. Oftentimes, we think, hindi uunahin ko na isang tao, sila yung nangangailangan, they need help. And again, I think that's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful trait of Filipinos, and it's a great thing to want to help. That's what I'm trying to do now with Spring. It's trying to pay it forward and trying to help. The world would be a very ugly place if we didn't think to put other people first. The problem here is that we've thought that so much that we have started to forget that taking care of ourselves is completely essential. Now, taking care of ourselves can be done in a number of ways. A lot of you probably watch BTS or, Blackpink, or you go binge watch Modern Family or Friends on Netflix, do face masks, Zoom call with your friends, catch up and get in some extra sleep. All of those things are great. And I'm not even sure if those are things you've been doing lately. But here's the thing. Self-care is a discipline. Self-care goes much deeper than just Netflix and face masks and chatting with your friends. Self-care actually starts by saying no. Self-care means, I think, for me at least, that you have to start listening to yourself, start asking yourself, what do I really need right now? What will help me? Self care is about knowing when to set your boundaries. Self care is about telling yourself, I can't do this right now. I don't have this mental or emotional space to do this right now. So I'm going to take a step back. Now, that sounds like a really big concept, but I'm sure a lot of you have been in this situation. And let me know if you have. Let's say you have group work, and one of your group mates have been feeling sick. So you say, go ahead, take a break. I'll take this on. Let me cover this part first. Happens again in the next one, and then the next one, and then the next one, and the next one. And they think it's okay. She's going to cover for me because she's done it before. And again, like I said, it's great to be dependable. It's great that you're responsible. It's great that people can count on you to help. But let's ask yourself, how does that make you feel? And have you been taking care of yourself? Especially at a time like this, in a pandemic, where you're constantly thinking to yourself, I'm luckier than most. I have a roof over my head and I'm being fed and I have a job and, being taken care of. All of these things are all true and all valid, but it doesn't mean that you don't need to take care of yourself sometimes too. But see, like I said, it's so deeply ingrained in us already to think, well, I should help other people first because other people have it worse. Newsflash, self-care is not selfish. There is no way to function 100%, and there's no way to help other people until you learn how to help yourself. So we go back to the oxygen mask analogy. You cannot help someone first until you learn how to help yourself, because you are going to run out of oxygen. Like on the plane, you will run out of love to give. You will run out of help to give if you don't stop for a moment to think, I need to set some clear boundaries. And for me personally, when I started learning how to do this and learning how to say, no, I can't handle this right now, that was when I actually saw that my mental health started to improve drastically, because I started to respect what I needed. I started to respect that I needed help. And I started to respect that, you know what, I can't do this alone. And oftentimes, I'm sure we're all thinking, I want to be able to do this alone. I can do this. Kaya ko to. I'm independent. I'm strong. I'm resilient. I have grit. Again, all great things. But one of the best and I think most brave things a person can do is learn how to ask for help. Because, next slide, please, we must learn that it is okay not to be okay. Oftentimes, we have had to force ourselves to get on with it. Like we have a mental breakdown and we're crying and we're freaking out and we turn off our cameras and we're like, okay, breathe, breathe. I have to get back on my class. But unless you've been in a position where it's literally impossible to get out of that bad place, then you probably haven't been told that, you know what, it's okay not to be okay. You don't have to have it together all the time. You don't have to be the girl with a plan all the time. You don't have to be the girl that has it all together all the time. You should be proud of yourselves for just being here today, stepping out of your beds, making your beds, making it to school today, making it to this talk. Because it takes a lot, especially at a time like this where everything is uncertain. So if you haven't heard it yet in this time, then I'm here to tell you and remind you that it's absolutely okay not to be okay. It is okay to take a break. It is okay to take space and understand that I need to take care of myself before I'm able to take care of anything else. It's absolutely okay to admit that you need help. And growing up, people always said I was brave and courageous. And, I was always known to be the girl that fought for my friends. If somebody was fighting with them, I'd be the first to come to their defense. So people often thought like, oh, she's so brave, she's so strong. She has been through so much, but she's still standing tall. But you know what? The bravest thing I could do was actually to say, I need help and that I wasn't okay. Next slide, please. Because the greatest strength actually comes from learning how to be vulnerable. It makes me so uneasy and so uncomfortable just saying, can you help me with this? Kasi bilang Filipino at bilang isang independent woman, I'm sure which is what all of you girls are. You've been raised by such great mentors and great families. I'm sure all of you are strong, independent women. So as a girl who can relate to that, one of the things that terrified me the most was learning how to ask for help. But one of the things that I'm most proud of in my 26 years, whoops, I revealed my age, in my 26 years of existence was actually learning how to ask for help. Because asking for help and learning how to say, I'm not okay and I can't do this alone, that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of vulnerability to say, I need you and I need help. But I think was the bravest thing that I could do for myself. Because if I didn't learn how to ask for help, if I did not learn how to tell people that something was off, if I didn't learn how to use my voice to say that something was wrong, then I wouldn't even be sharing this space with you today. I wouldn't have been able to reach more than 5,000 individuals sharing this message if I wasn't brave enough to say, I'm feeling vulnerable and I need help and I can't do this alone. So know that there is absolutely nothing wrong in saying you need help. There's no shame in saying you're not okay. And there's no shame in saying that you need people to help you with this. No man is an island. And if you've been conditioned to think that, trust me, I get it. And I understand it. But I'm here to tell you that you're not in this alone. And you don't have to be in this alone. There's great strength in vulnerability. There's great strength in being able to say, I can't do this alone, but here's the thing. I want to do this and I want to get through this. Next slide, please. Because if you've ever been in a dark place, and I'm sure that some of you here in this room have been there, especially during this time. If you've ever related to anything I said, you should know that the only way out is through. There are lots of ways to shortcut this. There are ways to push it down, pretend it didn't happen, pretend like everything is okay, pretend like I'm okay, I'm good, keeping yourself busy with homework, with work, keeping yourself busy with friends. These are all ways to forget what you're feeling inside. But none of these are permanent. All of these are temporary band-aid solutions. And I am living proof of that. I've literally tried every way out there of trying to solve the pain that I was feeling inside. But what I've learned is that the only way out is through. But the only way we're going to get through this is to admit that we have to do it together. You are not alone. You have never been alone. And if you're in an environment where you feel isolated or alone, there are people like me, people like Spring, people like your counselors who are here and who are ready to remind you that you don't have to do this alone. You don't have to do this without anybody's help. And you don't have to hide it. There is no shame in what you're feeling. It doesn't make you any less of a person. It doesn't make you any less of an independent, successful young woman. It makes you stronger, in fact. It makes you braver and more courageous for being able to admit that you don't have it all together. It's a deeper strength, I think, a more in-depth, more personal, courageous strength when you're able to admit that you need help. Now, I don't normally share my stories or my personal stories, but often when I'm with a young audience, I feel so exhilarated and I feel so connected to you girls, even when we're speaking through a screen. I myself went through a time where I thought, like I said, the dark place that I was living in my head was going to be my place in this world forever. I was convinced that the only way out was to end things and to just leave a world that made me feel like I was never going to be good enough, leave a world that made me feel constantly inadequate and inept and just not enough. A place that constantly left me in the dark. But here's the thing, there will come a time in your life where there will be people and voices that will tell you life can go on. There is light at the end of that tunnel. And I know how cliche that sounds, but life doesn't have to end here. And if you've ever found yourself in a place that thinks this bad place in my life is my life forever, I'm here to tell you I'm living proof of that. Living proof of the fact that it's not. It is not the end of your story. It is not the end of the road. Because there is a way out. And the out is through. We must learn how to keep fighting. Keep fighting the good fight. Every day will be hard. It will be a struggle. There will be some days where you feel like you don't have any fight left in you, especially at a time like this, a time where everything seems dark and bleak and uncertain. I understand that. I'm still there. But on most days, I also feel that there is so much life to live. And I hope that none of you ever think of giving up on that life to live. Because you have such a beautiful life ahead of you. So many opportunities to learn and go to college and fall in love and start your own families and become successful career women, all of these things that you would be missing out on if you didn't believe that there was a way out. And the way out is through. So I guess before we sort of end my portion of speaking, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about how spring, or its name even, came to be, because it's one of the most beautiful stories I have to tell. So when I was meeting with my co-founders, Dana and Hazel, we were in a coffee shop and we were thinking of what to name the organization. And we were looking at all of these foreign words to sound fancy and cool, like apricity or meraki, or just doing a Google Translate on words. But I was insistent on having a word that meant warm, So we started looking at words that meant warmth in other languages. And then my partners, who are also my best friends, they're some of the silliest people you'll ever meet. So medyo loko-loko din kasi talaga sila. And because I'm type A and I'm very responsible and I'm very I like to work hard, they like to joke around with me. So they started to sing. And I think they wanted to sing because they wanted to make me inis. They wanted to tease me. But they started to sing winter, spring, summer, or fall. All you need to do is call and I'll be there. And they were singing so loudly in Starbucks. And I wanted to strangle them and be like, come on, guys, we're working. But instead, I stopped in my tracks because I heard the word spring. And when I heard the word spring, I realized spring comes after winter. And I realized that after every winter comes spring. So no matter how cold and dark and lonely the days of winter get, spring comes. And when spring comes, we begin again. And I thought to myself, that perfectly describes the journey of someone who's ever struggled with their mental health. That is the perfect depiction of a journey that believes you're in that dark, lonely place of winter forever. Here's the thing. Seasons come and go. Seasons change all the time. And after every winter comes spring. And that's something that we can always bank on. And I think that at a time like this, we all feel like we're living in winter. Well, a very hot winter, because the Philippines is really hot. But I'm sure at this time in our lives, we feel like we're living in a perpetual winter where everything just seems so heavy and dark and difficult. But we will always have spring to look forward to. And when spring comes, we start over. We begin again, we try again, and we keep fighting the good fight. because the only way out is through. And the only way we're going to get through this is to do it together. So I hope you guys have picked up a little bit from me. And if there's anything I want you guys to remember, is that you are not alone. There are people like me, your friends in this room, your teachers, your mentors, your families, who will be here to remind you when you forget that you are not alone. So thank you very, very much, you guys, for giving me the time to share with you, to share my story, to share my journey. And I genuinely hope that some of you have picked up on that. I'm looking forward to the next 30 minutes of questions from you guys. I'm more than willing to answer whatever I can in the best way I can. So let's welcome back Thea and Alexa.
Oh, thank you so much, Miss Bettina, for helping us understand and know more about mental health and what we should do to take care of it. We hope through this talk we would be inspired to nurture this aspect of our well-being.
Now, I'm sure that many of you want to ask your own questions on mental health. Thank you to everyone who already sent in their questions in the chat box. And if you haven't yet, you may still write down your questions in the chat box here in Microsoft Teams. We'll now be starting our Q&A session with Ms. Bettina. So for our first question, between us, the students, I think we are aware of mental health, especially since it is all over social media and just media in general. What is your advice to us who are quick to self-diagnose or cannot distinguish between general sadness and real disorders such as depression?
Right. Thank you so much, Thea, for giving me that question. What I have been told, because I work with a lot of psychologists in my organization, so we do work with licensed psychiatrists, psychologists, and that is actually the most asked question that I get. Because how do you distinguish just being sad or anxious, which everybody is capable of feeling, right? Like I said, at a time like this, we're all very anxious. So it's hard to distinguish, like, when do I need to seek help? Now, the general rule is if you're feeling something for 14 days or more constantly, then if there's a change of behavior for that length of time, more or less you can tell that something is off. It's probably not just a general feeling of sadness. So usually that is like I hate to compare it, but like how COVID has an incubation period, just being relevant here. But for any mental illness, that is the general rule to see for about 14 days or 2 weeks whether that general feeling of sadness or a change in behavior, like you're not eating or you're overeating, you're not feeling interest in the usual activities you like hanging out with your friends, or you don't have energy to go to school. If that behavior lasts for about 14 days or more, then it might be a good time to seek help and see if you should get a diagnosis. But for me personally, this is um, my personal advice and not medical advice. For me, there really is no harm in seeking help at any point. Don't wait that long. Diba? Kung you already feel like you need help and you're not able to get out of the funk fast enough, you have nothing to lose. I think that it's better na maagapan yung problem earlier. It's better na you already seek help and you ask people for help when you need it, as you need it. But I mean, if you're talking about diagnosis, yeah, I would say 14 days is the best. But for me, if you're feeling like you need help now, there's no harm in asking for it now. If you want to start small, you can do it with a friend. You can approach one of your counselors or a teacher that you trust or a family member you're close to.
Thank you so much for that question, and thank you so much for answering, Miss Bettina. For our next question, this person asked, "What if you reach out for help but no one is available?"
Well, I understand that. First of all, it's not that I'm defending anyone, but often one of the main reasons that people are not available to help is because often they don't know how to help. So if it's a family member or a friend, sometimes when they're not available to help, more often than not, it's because they don't know how to help. So my first answer will actually be for anyone here who has been asked for help. Now I understand it's hard to extend help to people that you feel are struggling, because sometimes it's overwhelming. Parang how can I help you? I don't know how to help you with your problems. It's overwhelming and it's hard. It's hard to be a support system. But one of my first rules in anything is that you should know you don't need to say anything sometimes. Sometimes all these people need are someone to listen to them. So just lend an ear, lend your support, make them remember that they're not alone and that you're here to listen. But for the person who is asking, what if I reach out for help but no one's available? Know that that's why there are organizations like us, like Spring, and mental health hotlines. There are lots of us now who are here to extend that support. Because when I founded Spring, I knew that I was lucky to have a support system that was always there for me and really kept me strong. But I understand and I acknowledge that not everybody has that. So that's precisely why we mount things like this, is to extend help for those who don't have support systems already readily available to them.
Thank you for that advice. So I think at this point, since we're online, a lot of students feel like they should just focus more on their schoolwork. So what do you think are strategies that you could give to allow us to take care of our mental health while we do our schoolwork?
Well, I've never experienced what you guys are experiencing now. I mean, I can't imagine doing like my group work or my lab thesis or things like that online. It must be so difficult. But as a working professional who's been working from home for the past 7 months, what I have learned is one of my most helpful tips is really, I think, to set clear boundaries. Now kasi medyo hindi na malinaw yung line between work or schoolwork and home. So it's very important to set that clear boundaries. Like have days where you really don't touch your schoolwork, have hours that are off limits, because as long as it's there and it's available, you'll be tempted. I think you'll be tempted to focus on the schoolwork because that's the way, overachievers are built more often than not. And given the digital platform, it's right there. You don't even have to like dress up or take a car to your school, nandyan ka na. So it's so easy. So for me, it's very important, I think, to set clear boundaries, have hours that are really off limits where you're not supposed to touch schoolwork, have hours that are really just for you and intended to take care of you, your mental health, your physical health, for exercise, for hanging out with friends, things like that. It's very important to clear those boundaries. Another thing, my advice would be is like to have a separate area between your work and your self-care area or your rest area. Because I think it's very easy to get confused between focusing on work and like being there to like take care of yourself. So I would suggest clear boundaries between the two.
Thank you so much for that advice. So for our next question, we have, what are some things that can help with anxiety attacks?
Okay, one of the most practical tips that were ever given to me was something called physical grounding. So grounding is an exercise that you do when you're going through an anxiety attack. So it really helps to, like the exercise is to look at the things around you and say physically what you see. For example, in my room is white bed sheets, pink sheets, aircon, TV. It just helps to ground yourself because when you're going through an anxiety attack, it's very typical that your mind spirals and you get stuck in what you were thinking. So it helps to get your attention off whatever it is that's in your mind. So grounding really does help. So if it's counting or just naming all the physical things around you and your present, that really helps. For me, when I'm going through an anxiety attack, one of my first instincts or the people around me already know, I play ocean sounds just to like get my head out of it. And I really try to focus on my breathing and I count 10 to 1 and then 1 to 10. Again, the only point here and the only point of the exercise is to get your mind off the anxiety attack and to ground yourself.
Thank you so much. I'm sure that would help a lot of people, especially those who would experience anxiety attacks. Someone asks, what if I'm too embarrassed to ask for help?
Completely understandable. One of the things that I really had to get over was that shame because it's not easy. Like I said, it wasn't an overnight process na naisip ko, not ask for help. It's not easy. It's not easy to admit you need help. It's not easy to admit that you're struggling. So I completely understand that. If there's anything siguro that I can advise is that you can start by doing it anonymously. You can shoot an email to organizations or to your counselors. Um, One of the things that have really helped a lot of the kids that I work with, they start by sending in an email or sending in a message anonymously to ask. And when they feel more comfortable with me or whoever it is they're talking to, then they reveal, more or less what their more context about what the problem is. But it can help to still seek help, even if it's anonymously. There are also doctors, psychiatrists now who are doing online consultations. So if you want to meet with someone who doesn't really know you, your family, that's completely possible at this point. So yeah, that's my advice. It's like if you're not comfortable yet asking for help from people you know, then you can try and do it anonymously.
Thank you so much for that advice. So, for our next question, seeing the rise of social media and the increase of influencers over the past few years, what are your thoughts on the standards given by social media? And do you see social media as a curse or a blessing, or both, to someone's mental health?
Yeah. So it's so cool that this question was asked because Spring literally had a speaking engagement last month about social media and its effect on mental health. I think that often, like in the past couple of years, social media has somewhat been vilified or villainized because yun nga, nandun yung comparison and everyone thinks that social media is the devil because everybody is just like trying to be a certain influencer or whatnot. Um, but I actually think that social media can really be both a curse and a blessing. It's a boon and a bane. Has so much power, especially at a time like this. How else could we connect if not for social media, right? How else could we not feel isolated? My advice for social media is really to train yourselves to believe that what you're seeing online is not real life. It has to be a personal thing. You cannot control what you see on social media. You can mute. That's my most technical, practical advice. If somebody is making you insecure, mute them or unfollow. It's simple. If it's not doing well for your mental health, get rid of it, right? But like a more emotional piece of advice I would give is really train yourselves to believe and remember that social media is nothing but a highlight reel. Let's be real. It's not like anyone's gonna post a photo of themselves with a bad angle or a photo of themselves without eyebrows or without good lighting, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. Posting good things, nothing wrong with that. Nobody wants to post bad photos of themselves, right? But what's important is for us as an audience to remember that what we see online isn't reality. It's nothing but a highlight reel. So until you train yourselves to believe that, you will always view social media as the enemy. But I do think that social media is gaining a little bit of like um, footing in becoming a more authentic platform. Um, I mean, TikTok is huge now. I don't have one, but it's a place now where people can really express their authenticity or what they want with really good natural lighting, of course. But I mean, again, like I said, it's just a matter of shifting your paradigm, I think, and understanding that what you see online is not reality. It's not real life, but it has a lot of power. It definitely can help. So let's use its power. Spring, as an organization, really tries to use the power of social media to send an important message to the youth because we know social media is going to be here forever. No, there's no point escaping it now. Let's just use it for the greater good, right? So yeah, my piece of advice would be if it's not making you feel good about yourself, cut it out, just like in real life. Mute them and follow them, cut it out of your life. But also, more importantly, shift your paradigm and shift your perspective to understand. Keep reminding yourselves it's not real life. So there should be no pressure to live up to certain influencer who looks skinny or is dressed a certain way or has a great bag. You know, nobody knows what's going on in another person's life. It's just social media. Wouldn't give it that much power.
Thank you so much. I think the next question is actually kind of related to what you said, but in general, how can you stop belittling yourself?
Now, belittling yourself is common, I think, when you're a teenager, because you're constantly like comparing yourselves to other people and other people's progress. And people just always seem to be doing so much better than you when you're younger, you know? You're always thinking of what you don't have. So I think belittling yourself comes from that. What has helped me is really to work on my self image. So if there's something about yourself that's not making you feel good, my advice would be to kind of take control over that and understand that you have the power to change something you're not happy about. So let's say you're not happy about, I don't know, like your grades or your looks or your relationships. There is a way to change that. You have all the power in your life to change that. So I would start there. Um, it's such an empowering feeling to be proud of yourself and to love yourself. But I think belittling yourself is also deeply rooted in not being reminded how valuable you are. So surround yourself with people who won't be ever afraid to remind you of how great you are and how great you are at doing certain things, how beautiful you are, how talented you are. Acknowledgement never hurt a soul, you know. Acknowledgement is always helpful. So yeah, my advice is one, to work on the things that don't make you feel good about yourself. Instead of belittling yourself, channel that power into, you know, doing more for yourself and improving yourself. Or also surround yourself with people who can remind you that you are worth so much more than your thoughts.
Wow, I never thought about it that way. So for our next question, this person asked, what is your personal view on society's current tendency to glamorize mental illnesses or mental health?
That is a huge problem, especially because we're kind of having this conversation more now. It's a great problem to have, I guess, because it's better than not talking about it at all, right? So it's great that the conversation is kind of mainstream and it's really getting the spotlight right now. But yeah, definitely it is a problem. People glamorizing it and people just throwing around the word like I'm depressed or oh, I want to kill myself. These are not helpful phrases to actually discussing the gravity and the seriousness of mental illness. So I think that it really starts with us. We need to start changing our language. We need to stop using these words so lightly, like, oh, I'm so depressed right now. I want to kill myself or like kill me. Stuff like that does not help with kind of showing how serious this is. I think that media, mainstream media, has a great responsibility here too. We need to stop depicting mental illness as mental institutions and, you know, glamorizing suicide and all of these things. More real stories need to be heard, which is why I've never had a problem sharing mine, because I'm a real story, I'm a real face, and I'm not here to make it look better or make it sound better. I'm here to talk about it as it is. And I think the more people talk about their real stories, the more we can fight glamorizing this whole issue. So yeah, I think more if more people have the courage to share their real stories, it would definitely help the conversation.
Right, thank you. Um, so someone asks, what are ways to take care of ourselves, especially in times like this where we don't have time to rest due to the workload?
Okay, well, that is a very technical point, but I do want to kind of touch on that. There is no time because of the workload. There is time. You're just using it on your work instead of on you at this point. So I understand that 24 hours in a day feels like it's too short to take care of yourselves, but think about it. How many hours of those day did you do something that could have been spent on you or taking care of yourselves? So I would like to dispute that there is no time. There is time. You're just not using it on yourself. That is a personal decision you're making. Um, and this is coming from someone who's type A and who's perpetually busy. Yeah. I mean, I can also take my own advice. Sometimes I feel like I could take my own advice because Sometimes I do forget to take care of myself rather. But you know what? Sometimes like 15 minutes in a day, just meditate, rest. 15 minutes a day of not stressing could actually go a long way. So just taking a few minutes a day, every day, of learning how to take better care of yourself is a good start. Now, I understand that nobody really has time to just lounge around and not do anything and take care of yourself. But like I said, self-care is a discipline. It's not as easy as like blocking off an entire day and just, you know, chilling or not doing anything. It's not as simple as that. Self-care runs deep. Self-care is a discipline. Self-care means you have to constantly commit to taking better care of yourself. So do not make excuses. If you don't make excuses for taking care of your schoolwork, don't make excuses for not taking time to take care of yourself. So I think give more value to taking care of yourself is the first step. That is my first piece of advice. Give it more value. The reason you're not doing it is because you're not giving it the value it deserves.
Wow, I think this really gives us something to think about. Now, this person asked, what is your advice to students such as myself who are in households that say that mental health is just kaarte lang? I've tried to ask for help multiple times in the past, but that was the response I've had to deal with.
Yeah, you know what? I'm so glad. Thank you to whoever asked this question because one of the things that I get uneasy discussing a bit, especially with younger students, is family. But this is a matter that cannot be ignored. I mean, there will be some families who are not as accepting of mental illness as a sickness. There will be some parents or siblings or grandparents who will always believe mental illness is nothing but a figment of one's imagination. But I'm not here to create enemies out of families. I'm here to make you understand that they probably think that way because they're not educated about it. So we can probably start by educating our family members about it. One of the first things to do is to have that conversation. And it's not always easy. But what I've realized with the older generation or with parents or families is that they just don't want to feel left behind. So they like to shun anything they don't understand as not real because they don't like to admit that they don't know anything about it. So try to foster relatability, like ask about what they were like in college or in high school, um, because that often it's a start to a conversation. But I will admit that there are some families who are not even open to having that conversation at all. Again, which is why there are people like us at Spring, there are people like your counselors who do value mental illness as a real and serious threat to young individuals. And we are here to talk through it with you. So for me, I think like what's important is you learn how to take a loss. If your family's not ready to have that convo, walk away and try to have that convo with someone else. Find a support system that's willing to respect you for it. But if you have a family that you think is just lacking education, I say have that conversation because nothing feels greater than being able to have a support system that's accessible and understands what you're going through. I'd love to talk more about this actually. So if this person would like to send me an email or a message, I think my social media was in the last slide. So feel free to message me.
Thank you for that. I think that was something that would actually help a lot of people and isn't really talked about a lot. For our next question, what if I become a burden to someone while telling them my problems?
Well, you know what? I think that thinking of yourself as a burden is a common experience among people asking for help. Often we think, ayoko maging pabigat. I don't want to make people feel heavy or the like. But like I said, it takes bravery to learn how to ask for help. And that decision should be up to the person who's trying to help you. You don't get to make that choice. If that person wants to be of help and to be supportive for you don't get to force the thought na, no, but I'm pabigat to you. Let them make that choice. Allow people to be of help to you. Allow people to make you feel like they're there for you. Being pabigat is the number one barrier. Like that fear of being pabigat or being a burden to those you're asking for help from. But here's the thing. If you have real people who love you, which I'm sure you do, nothing you could do could ever be more important than keeping you alive and getting you better. That is the primary goal here. So even if, of course, it gets hard for your support system sometimes, it's understandable. It doesn't mean that it's not worth trying, because ultimately a life with you getting better, is still better than a life without you at all. Even if that means making a little bit of sacrifice to be there for the person you love. So I guess that's what I hope this girl should hear na whenever you feel like a burden, be assured that I'm sure mas burden sa kanila yung buhay na wala ka.
Thank you so much for that. So this person is asking, or when or how do I know that I need help?
Well, I think I answered this a bit in the first question, but I'll just reiterate. Usually, it's a good incubation period to wait about 14 days to see if the general feeling of sadness or anxiety hasn't gone away, and really to see if there are any behavioral changes that have lasted. But like I said, there is no right time to ask for help. If you feel like you need to ask for help, ask for it. There's nothing to lose.
Okay, thank you. So for our next question, how can I manage my own emotions and my responses on things that I don't have control of?
Okay, that takes a lot of practice. It's something that I'm still perfecting as well now. I think what's very important when you talk about managing your own emotions is first and foremost learning how to acknowledge them. There is no way to manage your emotions if you're going to push them down. So the first thing you need to do is really acknowledge it, say na parang okay, there's something's off, something's not right. Admit, be open to admitting that you are not feeling okay, and then from there try to get to the root of things. There is a very like step by step process to this. I know it sounds so parang clinical of sorts, but it really does help. It helps to first acknowledge and then get to the root of it. Only then can you see how to go about it. There is no one um, like cure all solution for managing your own emotions. But my first piece of advice would really be to acknowledge it. Don't push it down. Allow yourself to feel what you're feeling, write it out, try to get to the bottom of it, try to go back to your day or your week, see what might have triggered that, and then go from there and see how you can fix that. So if it's talking to someone who triggered something, or writing, bullet journaling really helped me too. Writing to myself to get myself out of my head, that helps too. So iba-iba for each person, but really I think the most important step is to acknowledge, get to the root of it, and then address accordingly.
Thank you. As much as our speaker wants to answer all of the questions, we're pressed with time, so maybe we can accommodate the last two questions.
This person asked, how do you deal with the pressure forced by everyone around you, and when people just force their expectations on you? This person is asking, how do you deal with all of the pressure that comes from the people around them and the external pressure that comes from people and other people and themselves? Yes.
Pressure all around, so like I 100% get it. Like I said, very driven girl, I'm very type A, um very focused. So I get it. I get that there's internal pressure, there's pressure on the outside, there's pressure from society, from your families, from your teachers. I get it. Like I said, as if the internal pressure isn't enough, we have to contend with the world. But like what I said, Kanina, one of the things that I really did for myself was to take a step back and tell myself, I'm literally not going to survive this if I continue to value the pressure around me, my internal pressure over my well being. So, I mean, that sounds like a really big concept, I know. So, let me try and break it down. For me, what has really helped is a self awareness that's so present and so deep that nobody can touch it. It's like, no, I know what I want to achieve, and I'm only going to listen to my standards right now because I'm up to here and I'm not going to survive. Also, it really helps to communicate that. with the people around you. So I know it's a little bit scary because you're young girls and you're young adults, and it's not always easy to come to your family and be like, wait, I need a break. But you can do that slowly. You can say like, I just need to take like a day off and things like that to like recalibrate and recharge. Yeah, one of the things that I really had to learn how to do is to know my limits. The pressure will always be there. I hate to say this, but even when you're older, when you're college and you're working, the pressure doesn't really get any less. The pressure stays. So it's really about managing it and learning how to kind of accept your limitations and say, hanggang dito lang yung kaya ko. And communicate that with yourself first and foremost. And then later on, the people around you. Clear expectations make for clear boundaries. And I cannot stress that enough. Making clear boundaries for yourself is the first step towards relieving yourself of some pressure. Or like I said, like 15 minutes a day of just doing nothing helps me.
Okay, thank you so much. For our last question from the chat box, what's your take on self-diagnosis? Like I'm OC, or like I'm so depressed, or I'm bipolar. Sometimes people just use those terms loosely. How should we go about that?
100% against it. I think I was already like shaking my head as you were just asking the question. The reason I really don't support self-diagnosis is because you have no idea what you might have. It might look like depression, but symptoms can easily fool you. It could be something else. And you might be like treating yourself in a way that's not actually helpful because you're not diagnosing yourself the right way. So please, for anyone who's listening to this, I am a big supporter of professional help, but I understand that not everyone has access to that. But as much as possible, do not self diagnose because you could be confusing your symptoms for something else. So I cannot stress that enough. You deserve the right kind of help. And the only way you're going to get the right kind of help is to stop self diagnosing and to stop saying, I'm depressed. I think I have anxiety. Don't go on Google and search the symptoms and believe that's what you have. That's not how it works. Okay. So, like, understand that this is a serious issue. And if we're going to make this conversation and give it the gravity it deserves and the seriousness that it deserves, then we really need to understand that self-diagnosis is one of the main enemies here. Reach out to someone who can help you, whether that's people like us, it's Spring, who can link you to the right people, or professional help or your counselors. Just please, as much as possible, do not self-diagnose because you might not be getting the help that you actually need.
Thank you so much to Miss Bettina for answering all of the questions patiently.
Now at this point, may I call on Mrs. Jatharine Smile Feranshaw, the high school guidance supervisor, to present the e-certificates to our speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you also, Ms. Bettina. Let me read the citation. Immaculate Conception Academy proudly grants the Certificate of Appreciation to Ms. Bettina Margarita Jose for sharing her invaluable knowledge as a resource speaker for the mental health awareness talk entitled Journeying Together for a Healthy Well-Being, given this 15th day of October 2020 at the Immaculate Conception Academy, Green Hills, San Juan City. Signed, yours truly, Mrs. Jatharine Smile F. Luhencio, High School Guidance Supervisor, Mrs. Deborah L. Yamzon, our High School Principal, and Sister Irene N. Fer, MIC, President. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we end this talk, we would like to remind all students to kindly evaluate the mental health talk by responding to the online evaluation link reflected on your screen or in the chat box, and also the link for your attendance for this event. Reminder that the attendance link will only be open for 1 hour. Thus, all students must sign in their attendance within the given period.
Thank you so much once again to everybody who attended to the talk, and thank you again to Ms. Bettina for giving us all of these wonderful insights. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
reflecting the poster now. Yeah. Thank you, Miss Bettina.